The following is for informational purposes only. For medical advice, please see a medical professional.
Welcome to Staying Alive with Margaret and Susy. This is kind of a part two of our last episode on finding your joy, because I think it's important to address what happens when sudden events change our lives like overnight. How do we keep finding our joy then? And we have to figure out a way to roll with it despite sudden changes. We want to keep our joy. And I think one of the ways Susie and I are so good at keeping our joy is that we're both people who know how to roll with whatever life throws in our path. And we're really fortunate in that. And we have
Yeah.
friends of many ages, and we've watched older friends navigate those changes. And Susie has also worked with an aging population and has lots of ideas about how to help people ask for help and get the help with what they need, even if they're seniors with limited resources. So
Yeah.
that's what
And
we're going to
sometimes it's
talk
not
about.
even yourself that goes through the change. Sometimes it's extended family or family members that are going through something that you have to change your life in order to be there for them.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I was thinking about dealing with change, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I was thinking, have you ever noticed that the grumpiest old people often have the complaint, why isn't the world like it used to be? And they just complain about that
Mhm.
over and over again. And like to be kind, I would say if somebody says that to you, you know that is a person who is really being challenged by a changing world and they need your help. They need
Yeah.
help. They need help to
Yeah.
figure it out. And so we're here to help with that today. You know, what happens when life suddenly throws up a roadblock? And there's so many that can occur when you're aging, and we don't want to scare anybody and throw out like, oh, all the terrible things that could happen, you know, because maybe they won't. But you know what I was thinking is that our generation has the unique perspective of what happened in the early days of COVID. And so, not just our generation, but the whole world, suddenly, the whole world changed overnight. And it gave us an idea of how we are with sudden change and how to figure out how to maintain contact and engagement. Two of the things that we talked about last time were so important. And
Right. And
yeah,
everyone's different. And so for some people, it wasn't as hard as it was for others. No.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, some people, for instance, are more extroverted and some are more introverted,
Hmm.
and some really need in person. Other people had a house full of people, and so they didn't necessarily need it. But I know for me, like just a couple examples there are that I have friends and family all over the world, you being one of them, right? And so the first thing we did was we got our technology set up and we had our Zoom account within 2 weeks of
Hmm.
having of COVID happening, and I ended up having to have my mother's memorial when she died over
Oh,
this type of a broadcast because she
oh,
happened to die at a time when not even the churches were open. And
oh,
I
okay.
was able to engage with my entire family that way and get support. I mean, we just have to come up with these things.
Yeah,
Another
that's
thing
right.
that happened, like I live in an urban area and we love to travel. So when COVID hit, we actually had just gotten rid of a car thinking, okay, we live in an environment where we don't need a vehicle anymore. And then COVID hit. And
Mm.
suddenly it was like, we need a vehicle. It's going to be the only way we can travel because travel is really high up on our needs that bring joy. And suddenly having one's own private vehicle was the only way to travel. And
Mm-hmm.
so we right away went out and bought a car. And thank goodness we did because a month or so later, the price of vehicles
Right,
skyrocketed because everybody
right.
figured out the same thing. And so So that's part of what I want you guys to be thinking about today is what are my most important needs so that if something suddenly changes, I'm going to be ready to quickly get that need met. That's what we want you to be thinking about
Right.
a bit today. And
Yeah.
yeah, so let's just talk about that. New ways to make life flexible and creative for the elderly
Mm-hmm.
to figure out how to maintain that engagement and how to stay connected and get those needs met. Do you have any thoughts right off, Susie, from working with
Well, I think
your
it's just
aging
important to,
population?
yeah, just to recognize that things happen. And I have a lot of experience visiting people from different backgrounds, different demographics who were isolated because I worked for the Meals on Wheels program. And to be on Meals on Wheels, you don't necessarily have to be low income, you just have to be homebound. In other words, you don't drive anymore and you can't necessarily get out and take public transportation that much.
Uh-huh.
So I had a lot of experience dealing with those people, and it was interesting seeing how people dealt with it because it was all over the map. Some people did fine. They had family that would come visit, although that became a big deal during COVID
Mm-hmm.
because all of a sudden the people that they had who were supporting them couldn't come over. And that became a problem. But I think at the times when there wasn't COVID, people had different ways. I did see people that I was very, very concerned about who were too isolated and
Mm-hmm.
spending too much time doing nothing or watching news on TV, or spending too much time doing things that did not bring them joy.
Yeah, because
So,
it is possible, I'm thinking in particular with my creative community and older artist friends, that there's nothing they want more than to be alone to do their artwork. And they don't mind
mm,
being isolated, but maybe they have to make modifications. Like I was thinking of one older friend who he had a studio that he used to go do his art in. And then when COVID hit, it happened to coincide when he was hitting his late 80s. He completely moved his art studio into his living room. His wife had
oh,
already passed away. He's like, my living room's becoming my studio. And he made it into his studio, and he lived on a single story place. And he would get up every morning and have his breakfast and then go into his studio in this one little bungalow that he lived in. And he was in complete joy all
mhm,
day, every day.
yeah.
And it was wonderful for him. And,
Well, if you think about the things that bring people joy, a lot of times it is other people, or it is something that they love doing, whether
mm-hmm,
it be cooking or art or music. One thing about music is that is one thing you can still do when you're alone, even if you don't play music. You can listen to music, and that can bring, a lot of relaxation, joy. I think for some people, a lot of they listen to music that was part of their youth. There's
yeah,
been some studies recently that have shown that people who identify with a type of music from their youth, if they listen to it in their older age, it really stimulates a part of their brain that can be very helpful. Um, there's a lot to music therapy for sure.
yeah. So hopefully, you know at this point the things that bring you joy, and
Hmm.
you're going to figure out how to get that need met. You're going to figure out how to get that need met. And
Right.
another thing I remember with music during COVID, I don't know if you remember this, suddenly musicians who were used to playing in public set up like a recording ways
Oh
in
yeah.
their homes, and they were offering concerts
Yeah, yeah,
online.
yeah.
And then
That was fun.
there was some other thing where they were like they had like artists, musicians all around the world playing the same song, and they figured
Hmm.
how to integrate
Hmm.
it together,
Yeah,
and they were
yeah.
coming together in that way. So there are creative ways to stay
There are.
connected, and that we have learned since COVID. And I, for instance, visited a friend in the hospital last week, guess what? I was in California and he was in Illinois, and we were able to do that through FaceTime over our
Mm,
phones. And he was so happy to see me and have me there with him.
that's nice.
So that's one thing that's a little bit lucky about the way technology has changed since COVID that's
Hmm.
helped our generation. And I mean, I live in an area now where there are driverless cars, so I won't even have to
I
worry
rode
about
in one
that.
with you.
And we now we now have food delivered to our houses. So I
Hmm.
mean, Susie can get that, and if she needs food to cook for her friends, or if she can't get out in her
Yeah.
garden, I don't know. So think about what are you willing to give up, and what is a deal breaker where
Hmm.
you have to have that in your life. I mean, when I think
Yeah.
about travel, I travel is pretty high on my list, and just last year I experimented with train travel, and it was really interesting because there were a lot of people with really limited walking ability who just stayed in their train compartment and loved just traveling across country,
Mm.
just looking out the window. And it was so interesting to see. And I have even been in situations where I'm already needing to sometimes order a wheelchair in a large airport for some reason or another if I'm recovering from an illness or something. And I'll tell you, being wheeled through the airport in a wheelchair, it's like you are the queen of the whole place, and you get to bypass security and everything.
Excuse me, I've
And
had a cold. Oh.
and it's a really wonderful thing. So I know for sure from my I have a 93-year-old friend who we have very similar interests and tastes, and she has gotten a wheelchair. Just not, she doesn't use it in her little small apartment, but she uses it when we go out because she
Hmm.
can't walk very far, and she
Sure.
wants to be able to go everywhere. And
Right.
she does
Right.
go everywhere with that wheelchair. And
Yeah.
I know that that'll be on my list. If I ever needed it, I'm not going to be the kind of person who just sits home and never goes anywhere because I can't
Right.
walk very far. I'll be the person who gets a wheelchair
Right.
for certain because
Yeah.
I have
I
to be able
mean,
to go to museums. I have to go hear live music. Those things are important to me.
right. For some people are a little more introverted and they're happy to read books and stay home more
Mm,
often, I think. But everybody is different.
right. And it may be that what brings you joy is visiting your grandchildren or something, as
Right.
you've suggested in the last episode. And so that's something to think about because maybe when you go visit your grandchildren, it relies you driving there, or it
Hmm.
relies on you getting on an airplane or something. And so perhaps the time will come when that's not available. And then you have to think about, what am I willing to sacrifice? Do I
Hmm.
have to see my grandchildren? Do I have to think about relocating? Or am I satisfied with seeing my grandchildren over FaceTime and the
Hmm.
computer and enjoying my friends' grandchildren who live down the street because I do
Yeah.
not want to leave my home. I love it so much. And
Yeah.
those are just like the kind of things
Right.
that we need to think about and
Yeah.
plan for.
I
As
think I think now's a good time to talk about if you can't um, access things that you want to access, where
mhm,
do you get help? And I worked with a senior center for the Meals on Wheels program, and they do, most communities have a senior center, first of all. And if there is one in your community, it's a really good place to find resources. They're serving meals, and that's a really good way to socialize. They oftentimes can help you with transportation if you can't drive or can't get there on your own. They also have other agencies. There's something called an area agency on aging, which is very common in communities. I know in our state, the one in our county is called Northwest Regional Council, for instance. And they not only provide resources, but they can hook people up with home health care. And sometimes people qualify to have home health care paid for through Medicare, or Medicaid. So you should always try to access those local resources. There's also an agency in our community called Bellingham at Home. And basically what it is you pay a membership, I think it's $300 a year. And then you can have people come to your house and do things for you that you can't do yourself anymore, like change a light bulb or clean a gutter or just do things that are too hard for you to do anymore. So there
Oh,
are
that's great.
resources out there. And I think it's important that people realize that it's okay to ask for help,
Yeah.
and
And isn't there also a division that the person can come and do some light housekeeping, a
yes,
little bit of
yes,
laundry,
yes.
all those
Sometimes
kinds of
when I say
things.
home health care, what it is oftentimes is not just health care, it's also help with chores.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to help with pets necessarily, so forget that, but they can help you do simple chores around your house, putting the laundry in, or something that has just gotten too hard for you to do. And sometimes people need help bathing.
Yeah.
They need help getting in and out of the tub. Maybe they have a facility in their house for bathing that is not real conducive to their needs anymore. And
Yeah.
it's sometimes very expensive to change that. So then sometimes people need help.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to not be afraid to ask for help.
Right.
Yeah.
And these things like chores and bathing, you might say to yourself, well, wait, that's not really bringing joy in my life. But if you think about it,
Yeah,
those things stand in the way of you having the joy in your life
that's
because
right.
seniors, when we're getting overwhelmed with the day-to-day tasks around the house, that becomes this all-consuming,
Right.
nagging problem in our lives,
Right.
and then that stands in the way of the joy. Like,
It
oh, I
does. It
can't go
does.
out and do this because
Or I'm embarrassed
I
to have
have to
somebody over to
clean
my
my
house
house.
because it's such a mess.
Mm,
Yeah. I mean,
that's
yeah.
a thing, a
I mean, just,
consideration.
I think about when I've had the flu or something like that, or when I'm very ill, my house can get to be kind of a mess if nobody's around to help me. And think about that if it goes on for months.
Yeah,
Some people
and
are physically incapable of cleaning their house, so
yeah,
it can be very hard.
and then they might not want visitors, even though they
That's
want
right.
visitors, they'll be embarrassed to have them, and so of course
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
that kind of help. So
I
keep
just think people need to keep on keeping on.
yeah, that's what we're doing. So keep finding your joy, and please feel free to ask us any questions or
Yeah.
leave a comment. And anything else we want to say today, Susie?
Well, I think it's important to realize that things happen to people. We all have things that happen, and many times there are things that we don't expect to happen. And when they happen, we got to be ready and just realize that there are challenges, but we can meet those and we can still find our joy. Sorry, my thing keeps falling out.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah. Susie and I both had winter, spring colds, and we're still
Yeah.
finding our joy and doing our recording. And
Yeah.
I'm getting a lot of joy out of doing this too, by the
I
way.
am
I
too.
love doing this with you, Susie, and we're going
Yeah.
to keep doing it.
Yep.
And you want to tell people about like,
Yeah, look, be sure and like and subscribe and leave any comments or tell us what you think.
yes.
And
And
until then,
until next time, we are staying
staying alive.
alive.
You've been listening to Staying Alive with Margaret and Susy. This show is hosted by Margaret Cooley and Susie Hymas. To subscribe to our show, leave a comment or ask a question, please visit stayingalivewithmargaretandsusie.com. Our podcast is available on all major podcast platforms. If you've enjoyed our program, please feel free to leave us a 5-star review. Thanks for listening.